If you would state your name for the record.
Dr. Stephen Hotze, Houston, Texas.
Good to see you, Dr. Hotze.
Pleasure to be here.
Let me just say that I'm curious about all these buttons, yes to the bill. I haven't seen that this session. How did that come about? Are these people who have testified and felt that there was a problem, or just how do you garner buses of people or something, all these little buttons? I just want you to know. You don't have to ask them. I want to know your opinion as to all this groundswell of people that came.
Representative King, there are many people across the state have been very concerned about the board and broadcast this through the internet, on newsletters, websites, txppr.com, AEPS. I have a radio program. I've talked about it every day for the last 2 weeks.
I know.
And I hope we've received some phone calls.
We don't get that in Abilene. Yeah, we couldn't do our work because of all your phone calls. It was very effective.
But it's a Carnegie thing.
Yeah. Don't all we need is some transparency and some dialogue and communication and shine the light of day on things. And usually that kind of once the light of day shines, everything kind of works out real nice.
What's your prediction on the decrease in number of complaints if there was no anonymity in the complaints?
I think there would be a significant number of decreases. Absolutely. The 4 complaints I had would have gone away. On advertising, who do you think those came from? They had to come from competitors, and the 4th one came from a competitor. They wouldn't have shown up, and that would have saved me several $100,000 a time. Now, I could afford it. But what about this doc that has 2 or 3 people in his office and he gets a complaint before the board? He can't hardly afford to hire an attorney. He's got to pull all those records together. It basically will drive him out of business. And I thought we're trying to bring doctors to Texas, not trying to drive them out of Texas.
Chair calls Andrew Schlafly, Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, Inc., shown for the bill. And he is General Counsel. Hi, good to see you today.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm General Counsel to the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which is a national group of thousands of doctors. We were founded in 1943, so we've been around for a long time. Our motto means all for the patient, and our members tend to be in small practices that serve underserved areas, a lot of rural doctors, a lot of small practices we've heard mentioned already. It's one thing when you're in a big practice and you get hit with a complaint and it's a $50,000 or $100,000 expense, you can survive that. You're in a small practice, you can't survive that. And those are our members. And we hear from our members, and we hear more complaints about the Texas Medical Board than all the other boards in the country combined. No kidding. This is genuine, what you see in this room. This is not some orchestrated thing where there's somebody who's got a lot of money who's paying people to sit here. These are autism patients, for example. The autism patients can tell you what happens to their doctors. When a doctor treats autism, he will invariably get a complaint filed against him eventually. This is what's happening to the autism doctors in this state, and that's why you have a lot of autism patients here. Lyme disease, similar situation. And the doctors themselves are getting devastated by the process here. Now, the anonymous complaints, I want to correct a few things. Representative King suggested, well, you can just sue the person, the competitor who filed a malicious complaint. No, you can't, because you can never get a copy of the complaint. You can never prove who filed that complaint. The position of the Texas Medical Board is they are prohibited by law from ever turning over that complaint. They won't turn it over in a legal proceeding. They will never, ever turn over a copy of that complaint, so you can never prove your case. You could have a political opponent file a complaint against you. You could file 20 complaints against you, and you can never prove that your political opponent did, because the Texas Medical Board says their hands are tied by the law. They can never, ever turn over a copy of that complaint. And that's what needs to be fixed. That's one of the key reforms that we have proposed in this legislation. And just to be clear, our association is fully supportive of HB 3816.
Section 2.
Okay, Section 2 concerns conflict of interest, and this is another key reform. Because right now, somebody can sit on the Texas Medical Board and receive monthly payments from an insurance company while that person disciplines doctors in the state of Texas. And not only can that be done,
say that again. A person can receive what?
A person can sit on the Texas Medical Board, supervise discipline Texas Medical Board, and be receiving monthly checks from an insurance company while that person sits
Because they were employed by the insurance company?
Because they have some arrangement with the insurance company. They sit on an advisory commission. They're a consultant. Yep.
That's large.
But you're saying physician is being paid by Blue Cross?
Yes. In fact, the physician was paid by Blue Cross. And my recollection was he had some sort of arrangement where he was on an advisory commission for Blue Cross.
So when that was discovered, you wouldn't have to disclose that information when you're appointed by the governor?
My understanding was he did not disclose it, and it only came to light in litigation, where I actually deposed this individual and asked him if he was receiving monthly payments from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And after first resisting answering the question, and I had to go to the judge to force him to answer the question to find out how much he was receiving, only then did he disclose it. And I don't believe it was ever disclosed before, and I don't think it's prohibited by law. And so one of the reforms is to prohibit that kind of conflict of interest. Obviously, someone who's on the payroll for an insurance company shouldn't be disciplining doctors at the same time. Insurance companies are adverse to doctors. A judge would never do that.
Just a couple of degrees.
We need a venue for someone to recognize that all these autism doctors are getting taken out by the board. I mean, we need someplace where somebody can bring that to light. Hey, a cluster, cystical cluster, like all the pain management doctors in Abilene have had anonymous complaints filed against them. Now, Dr. Norman Dozier wrote that in a letter to the former State Senator Kyle Janik, where he said that, but he had no forum to bring that light. That hey, we got more than a cluster here. When there's a complaint rate that's less than 10% against doctors and physicians, and nearly every single pain management doctor in the Abilene area has had a complaint filed against them, something wrong is going on. Somebody should look into this. And with a little sunshine, you can get a lot of reform.
Again, there are a lot of physicians that have very, very busy days that don't have time to give. So are we limiting the pool greatly with that?
I don't think so. I think doctors would be happy to participate as an expert reviewer. I think it's an honor. I don't think there's any trouble with the board getting expert reviewers. They have immunity for what they say. I think doctors would jump at the opportunity. The key is we want to make sure the doctor's in the same or similar practice. It's not someone who says he's an orthopedic surgeon, you find out he hasn't fixed a bone in 15 years. And he's there giving an expert opinion about some new technique that a doctor's doing. How can you possibly know what is innovative and good? And what happens when you don't do this is you tend to deter innovation. That's what happens. And the innovative doctors want to get hit hard.
Are there things in this bill that enhances the ability of the board to go after the really bad players out there?
Well, it does enhance that ability because it allows the board to focus on the serious problems. If you can cut out these frivolous complaints, these complaints that are filed by the ex-spouse, the competitor, the political opponent, the neighbor, you cut all that stuff out, the board can now focus on the really bad doctors. And believe me, we don't want any bad doctors out there. We want them stopped as quickly as possible. But it's usually pretty obvious. And that's why we get back to the clear and convincing standard. If you've got a bad doctor, if you've got a doctor who's got a drug addiction and he's a surgeon, you can usually prove that by clear and convincing evidence. You can make him give a urine sample. I mean, when you got a bad doctor, you can usually prove it with these higher standards, and that's what the board should be focusing on.
I'm reminded, and I won't share the name, but I'm reminded of a Houston area doctor that practiced for years, of which there were some just terrible outcomes related to this physician's practice, and it just seemed that it was such a slow response to go after somebody that clearly had problems and was ultimately, distributing narcotics and, cocaine and a whole number of other things. I mean, really a bad player. But it just seemed to go for a very long time before that particular physician had his license revoked and stuff. And so I guess what I'm looking to in this is that does this actually facilitate the ability of the board to expeditiously go after those individuals that we know need to be reined in?
I feel it does. I feel it enables the board to focus on exactly that type of physician and not have all the other clutter getting in its way.